News, open borders and the problem of immigration. Speaking to a crowd in Duluth, Minnesota, President Trump accused Democrats of using the immigrant child issue to distract from the corruption in Washington. Mr. Trump told the crowd, the Democrats want open borders. What's the real agenda behind open borders, and what does it have to do with Bible prophecy? I will answer this question on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I thank you for joining me on Monday's edition of End of the Age. And I have a prayer request for everyone today. Irvin Baxter has had something in his joints, in his body. It's been moving around. It started in his elbow, it went down into his hands, and it got to the point where he couldn't type for a while. Then it moved up into his shoulder, and he had a problem putting his jacket on. And now it's moved down into his knee. And I know that sounds crazy, but we just need God to heal him. So in your time of devotions and prayer, I would ask that you would keep Irvin Baxter in your prayers. It's just a weird thing. It's not really like he's really sick or anything like that. He's just got this thing that's moving around his body in different joints, and we need God to heal him. So as you pray in your own personal devotions, I ask that you would remember Irvin Baxter in your prayers. That's why we switched programs. I'm normally on Tuesday. He's on Monday. We switched today. And so he's been at home today in prayer, asking God to touch him. So remember Irvin Baxter in your prayers as you go before the Lord this evening or in the morning perhaps. Remember him, and I know that he would appreciate it, and we would here at End Time Ministries as well. So on today's program, you've all heard in the news recently about the immigration problem here in the United States. Now, I know you guys a lot of y'all are listening from around the world, and you'll just have to bear with me. But we're just kind of having an issue here in the United States down on our southern border. And you've heard about open borders. Should we fling the borders open and let whosoever will come in? Or should we build a wall and protect our borders? It was what the recent election was all about, the presidential election. The process of globalization versus the process of nationalization of a nation, protecting nationalism, protecting your borders. And so I wanted to talk about that today because it has some prophetic implications to it. And here's the bottom line. Open borders, those that advocate open borders, it means world government. It's the process of globalization, doing away with the nation state, creating a one world global state that answers to a world government. Now, that's the goal of globalists. Now, there may be people that are boots on the ground down here at the border of Mexico and the United States. They may not have a clue what's really going on behind the scenes. And you might hear a CNN report or a MSNBC, CBS, whatever. And they may not even really know what they're reporting on. Many of them are just attacking Donald Trump, and that's just what that's an agenda that's behind it all. But at the end of the day, advocates for open borders, whether it's in Europe or the United States, around the world, wherever, it's the agenda behind that is the United Nations and the world government. So let's talk about it, because that's what the bottom line is. Just last week, the Council on Foreign Relations, many of you will recognize that, published an article titled Domesticating the Giant, the Global Governance of Migration. And they said in the article, the challenge was that migration is a natural and defining phenomenon of the globalized world. So they recognize that we're living in a globalized world. the process of globalization. And really, it occurred after the end of the Cold War, 1989, when the Berlin Wall was taken down. We moved off into it in the early 90s. And the open trade, and the people started talking about open borders and a lot of different things. The process of globalization. The nation state needs to be done away with. Now we need a global world. Well, the Council on Foreign Relations was writing about this, and they said that there were 170 million migrants in 2000, and today there are roughly 260 million migrants around the world. So they were advocating a world governing body. Here's their recommended solution to the problem of migration and immigration, and it's kind of gotten out of hand. Their recommended solution, and I would be speculating, but who's to say but what this wasn't put out, this wasn't started on purpose. And, it might be able to be proven. We'd have to talk about that further and go into maybe a little more detail. I don't have time to go into all that today. But, there are people that are really good about creating a crisis and then saying, hey, the solution to this is world government, the United Nations. Well, that's what they're doing here in this Council on Foreign Relations article. I'll get into, after the break, the recommended solutions to the Council on Foreign Relations, the great crisis of immigration and migration, and what their solution is. Of course, you're talking about the ruling body of the United States, the behind the scenes, the Council on Foreign Relations, Brookings Institute, the Federal Reserve, all those different things, the master plan of the dragon.
We are living in one of the greatest times of human history. We are just before the second coming of Jesus Christ. There are close to 1,000 prophecies concerning this time. Yet, the scriptures tell us that most people will miss the second coming of Jesus. You do not want to miss this. You can understand the times we live in and what is just ahead. You can share the information with others. Know the truth about Bible prophecy. The Understanding the End Time series was designed to help you learn the prophecies in easy-to-understand terms. 14 hours of teaching about the mark of the beast, World War III, Islam in Bible prophecy, and so much more. Equip yourself today by going to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 to get your Understanding the End Time series. The End Time Prophecy Tour was the most wonderful tour. I would like to thank Irvin and Judy Baxter for a fabulous trip to Israel. I know it took much effort and planning to make it successful. What a tremendous time we all had, which warrants a great big thank you. You can't encapsulate it into words. You can't capture it with a photograph. You just have to experience Israel yourself. The Queen of Sheba said, "The half has not been told." I concur. What an awesome experience to visit the land of Bible history and see it come alive as you walk its paths. I shall be forever changed. Dale from Louisiana.
Join us October 25th through November 5th, 2018. You too can experience Israel with Irvin and Judy Baxter. Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 to sign up today.
So the Council on Foreign Relations has said that there's a huge crisis here in the United States. Immigration, migration, the problem on our southern border. What's their recommended solution? Number one, that the United Nations member states should agree on a normative framework for the multilateral governance of migration. They're calling for a world government. Number two, the United Nations should consolidate the global institutional architecture on migration. So at the end of the day, the Council on Foreign Relations, like many others, all these globalists, they're calling for a world government. Well, they say, well, hey, we got a crisis here. Migration and immigration and people moving all over the world. We need to govern that by a global institution. What's the global institution? The United Nations. That's what's really going on behind. There are people that are attacking Donald Trump and saying, "Hey, you're not handling the opening the borders. You're not doing it right. The immigration policies, all these different things. You're not handling this correctly. You're supposed to be handling it the way the world government wants you to handle it, just like the Obama administration was handling. Open the doors and let them come in." That's what we did. This is what we were dealing with in the last election. Hillary Clinton was for open borders. Now, she said she wasn't, but she advocated letting all kinds of people come in. Where Donald Trump said, "I'm going to build a wall." That was the difference. It was the process of globalization versus nationalism. And that's what we're dealing with here with the Council on Foreign Relations, everybody else, all these globalists that advocate open borders, even in Europe, wherever it's at. You're talking about global governance. Well, let's talk about world government real quick, and then I'm going to get off into some history. What did our forefathers think about protecting our borders and open borders? So many of you will recognize from the world government standpoint that global elites, if you haven't heard about this, I'll give you a quick history. Global elites have been really for decades working assiduously to create a world government. The goal is a global governing system so all-inclusive and really minutely detailed that it will control all aspects of every person's life, regardless of what nation you live in. The United Nations wants to control every aspect of your life and my life. The intention is to eventually regulate all individual production and consumption patterns. What you eat, how much electricity you use, how much water do you use. That's how, when I say detailed, I mean detailed. A digital footprint of what you spend your money on, everything. And the ultimate objective of this thought manipulation is resulting in absolute obedience and allegiance to this one world governing body. That's the goal, okay? So the outcome of these efforts is the formation of international institutions specifically designed to govern the world. They would include many recognizable organizations: the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the International Criminal Court, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. And that's just to name a few. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. So the United Nations is the seat of this world government, located right here in New York. I was just up there last week. I was about 8 blocks from the United Nations. I've been to the United Nations many times. And the United Nations is the seat of world government. It was created to be a socialistic one world governing body. Now, I know you were told in high school and in college that it's the last great humanitarian hope for mankind. I know that. But that's not what it was designed to be. From its inception to this day, it was designed to be a socialistic one world governing body. So in 2012, Fenn Olser Hampson, Paul Heinbecker, and Gordon Smith of the Ontario-based Center for International Governance and Innovation, they contributed their thoughts about the role of the United Nations and the future of global governance in a feature of the Council on Foreign Relations. Here we are at the Council on Foreign Relations again. And it was at the Council of Councils initiative. And they said this, and I quote, "As we adapt to the emerging global threats," and there are, in their eyes, there are many, and a lot of them they have created. They said, let's not lose sight of what we have achieved. The UN has largely fulfilled the chartered goals established in San Francisco. Well, the chartered goals were written by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy. They say, hey, we pretty much fulfilled those goals. And in doing so, has spawned an extensive body of international laws. This is how they're governing the world. International laws, treaties, norms, practices, and institutions that govern most facets of interstate relations. So this is how they're governing the world. And they say with these applications, the UN Charter has become, get this, the world's central operating system the motherboard of global governance. It was designed to be a socialistic one world governing body. But they're saying this is the motherboard of global governance. So it's the plan to govern the world and its citizens, and it is progressing very rapidly at this point. So that's the United Nations. I know what you were taught in school. I got that. But I've told people in my Bible studies for years about the United Nations, and they're like, what? Come on. No. It's the great humanitarian hope. They go around and help people in tsunamis and volcanoes and all this other stuff. No, that's not what it's designed to do, folks. The United Nations is designed to be a socialistic. I can't say that enough. You say, well, do you wonder why most of the nations around the earth currently have a socialistic ideology? Because the United Nations is designed to be a socialistic one world governing body. And they're trying to implement socialistic principles here in the United States. There's a huge faction of people. Bernie Sanders is one of the biggest ones. He was one of the last two to be in the presidential election as a candidate, him and Hillary Clinton. He was a Democratic socialist. He just straight up said it. And Hillary Clinton, she said, I'm a progressive, but I'm a progressive who knows how to get things done. A progressive is a socialist. Same thing. So there are many people here in the United States that are pushing socialism, pushing, because they believe in a one world government. So the New World Order, let's talk about that. After World War II, the United States led the efforts to create a New World Order, and really for the last 7+ decades has been one of the principal drivers behind that. We led the charge, okay? Every administration since the founding of the United Nations back in 1945, get this, whether it was Republican or Democrat, has fully supported the New World Order, okay? And they've wielded vast amounts of international power, and along with the other 4 victor nations of World War II, China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, the United States is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, which has veto power over any Security Council resolution. Now, there are a lot of people that would like to do away with that veto power. The United Nations is totally anti-Israel, and we've protected Israel over 40+ times now since the 70s against the United Nations and their resolutions. The United Nations would love to do away with that veto power. And perhaps they will in the future. I don't know that for sure. But that's the goal here, an all-encompassing world governing body. Well, it's prophesied in Scripture. That's my goal here today, is to tell you how this opening borders and the immigration, the migration, the governance of this is all about world government, and it's prophesied about in Scripture that there would be a world government. So 650 years before John wrote the book of Revelation, in about 80 to 90 AD, the prophet Daniel was given a vision of 4 beasts that represented kingdoms or nations that would exist at the time of the second coming. So he was prophesying about something that would occur 2,500 years in the future. We know that now, looking back through history. And the 4 beasts described in Daniel 7, verse 4 through 7, and the modern nations that they symbolize are a lion with eagle's wings, which was Great Britain was the lion, and the eagle's wings represented the United States. There was a bear, that's Russia. There was a 4-headed leopard, that's Germany. A 10-horned beast, the reborn Holy Roman Empire or the current European Union. Those are the 4 beasts, 4 separate beasts given in Daniel's vision in Daniel 7. Jump forward 650 years. In Revelation, John uses these same symbols, Revelation chapter 13, of nations to describe the end-time one-world government. In John's account, the 4 separate nations of Daniel 7 federalize into one large global governing body. And the interpretation, this is Revelation 13, 1 and 2, says, this is John giving a vision. He was out on the Isle of Patmos. He was exiled at this point. He was given a vision. And he said, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns, which would be the European Union, the 10 crowns. It had 10 crowns, and upon its heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. So it had the body of the leopard, which is Germany. The feet were as the feet of the bear, Russia. The mouth is the mouth of the lion, Great Britain. And the dragon, or Satan, gave this entity its seat, power, and its great authority. So the one world government in the earth today, it derives its power from Satan himself. It's Satan's effort to rule the world and to get everybody to pledge allegiance to him through the Antichrist. That's why you can never pledge allegiance to the Antichrist or his one world governing system, because you'll be pledging allegiance to Satan himself, his kingdom, rather than God's kingdom. At the end of the day, that's what it's all going to boil down to. Satan's kingdom or God's kingdom. And of course, you know, we can help you here at End Time Ministries get ready for to participate in God's kingdom, not Satan's kingdom. Very important. Be born again, attend a good church, and serve the Lord. Be part of God's kingdom. You're part of Satan's kingdom, it's not going to look too hot for you in the end. Okay? So this prophecy of a world government is a prophecy. It's a 2,000-year-old prophecy of a world government that is currently being established. And you can watch it being established. Follow the United Nations. Follow the International Criminal Court. What they're doing, they're governing the world. The Sustainable Development Goals are all about a global effort to govern every single person on the planet. And I'll get to it here in a minute, but one of the Sustainable Development Goals deals with migration and the global governance of migration. And you can see it happening as we speak. There are people that believe in a global governing entity should manage the migration of people around the world. And they don't want to have borders in their way. So that's what open borders. They say, open up your borders so we can globally manage people around the world. Why? Because the United Nations is socialistic. They believe in wealth redistribution. They believe in doing away with the haves and the have-nots. So if the United States has too much, which we're a very wealthy nation, they don't believe they say that's unequal. You've heard about inequality. We need to equal out the playing field. So we need to redistribute the wealth of the United States to other underdeveloped nations. That's what this whole scheme is all about. Look at the Sustainable Development Goals. A lot of that is about wealth redistribution. Global warming, climate change, it's all about wealth redistribution. So in this world governing body, the United States is missing, and I'm thankful for that. The eagle's wings, remember they were in Daniel 7. They were symbolic of the United States back in Daniel 7. They're not mentioned in the combo beast of Revelation 13. Everybody living here in the United States should be very, very, very thankful for that. We do not want to be a part of the world government in the end time. God's coming back to destroy that. It's very clear. The Battle of Armageddon, the world governing armies come down against Israel to battle. God comes back, plants his feet on the Mount of Olives, and destroys that entity. You don't want to be a part of that. He's coming back to tear down human government and set up his kingdom here on the earth. So this indicates the United States, the eagle's wings not being mentioned there, it indicates that the U.S. is not going to be included in the world government of the end time. And the prophecy also indicates that world dominance will have shifted from the United States to the powers of Europe. We know that Europe, the revived Holy Roman Empire, is going to run the world at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ, with the Antichrist at the helm. And that's why and you can see this happening in the news all the time. In the Council on Foreign Relations article that I mentioned earlier in the program, it talks about Europe taking over a global leadership role in the absence of the United States. And the article was written this month, 2018. So they know exactly what they're doing. What was prophesied about in the Bible 2,000 years ago is coming to pass right now. And I still have people say, well, we're not, Dave, come on, we're not in the end time. What? We're not looking for the end times to begin hundreds of years from now. We're living through this stuff, folks. I don't even have to sensationalize this to get you on board with me. This stuff is happening all around us. And it's hard for us to keep up with it all. It's happening so fast, really. You know, about the peace agreement and the mark of the beast. I mean, all this stuff, it's all happening. It's steamrolling, and it's speeding up. So we're living in the end time. It's very important we understand that. So really, with this, watching this going on with the United States not left in the world governing body, not mentioned in the world governing body, Irvin, Baxter, myself, a lot of us, our Bible study teachers, our research team, it left us with a few questions over the years. Since we're presently the leader of the world government, or have been for many decades, how would that power shift take place? You know, would the United States be wiped out in World War III? We know there's the Sixth Trumpet War coming. What's going to happen to the United States? And this is very important to the topics of open borders and immigration and global governance of migration. Because right now, Donald Trump's not wanting to play ball with the international community, and you can hear them howling about it. You can hear people here in the United States howling about it. Have you heard Nancy Pelosi say anything about Donald Trump and the open borders and what's going on in the southern border? Look at the people that are attacking him because of this. And all he's doing is enforcing existing laws, and yet they're screaming and howling about it. Why? Because they want a world government, and he's fighting against that. That's where we're at. And it's all wrapped up in Bible prophecy. The Bible prophesied this was going to happen, that there was going to be a world government and the United States wouldn't be involved in it. So one of the questions was, we knew about this, but would the United States be wiped out in World War III because we're not going to be a part of the world governing body? Or would we be brought to our knees to become a non-factor on the world stage on, we don't know that at this point. Well, we do. I'm going to give you the answer to it here in just a moment. But on the other hand, would we go into complete isolation? I mean, these were questions that we had. Well, I'm going to give you scriptures to answer these questions. What's going to happen to the United States in the end time? When we get back from the break, I'll join you on the other side.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
We have some exciting news for you today. We have created a new lesson that exposes the establishment. 3 sinister forces are trying to maneuver the United States into a system of global governance. Who is the mastermind behind these organizations? These forces, which are controlled by Satan the dragon, will work hand in hand with the Antichrist, and Americans are fighting back. What is the master plan? Where do things stand right now? We rip the covers off of Satan's hidden agenda and give you answers to all of these questions in Master Plan of the Dragon. Arm yourself with the knowledge to combat these forces. Go to endtime.com to receive your copy today or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So the question on our mind for years, and we hadn't really understood this part of the prophecy, was what would happen to the United States? Well, Revelation 12, jump back one chapter from Revelation 13, it's the only other place the eagle's wings are mentioned in the prophecies of the Bible. Revelation 12:13 says, the dragon will persecute the woman with 12 stars around her head. The woman's Israel, and in this chapter, and the 12 stars symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel. And so, according to Revelation 13, the dragon is Satan. He's going to use the Antichrist and his world governing system to do the persecuting. Well, John tells us in the text, in the next verse, in verse 14, Revelation 12:14, that Israel will be protected during the Great Tribulation, which will occur during the final 3.5 years immediately preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it says, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. The term time, times, and half a times, that's 3.5 years. We know that because other places in the Bible it's referred to as 1,260 days or 42 months. It's all a 3.5 year period. So a clear understanding of Revelation 12 and 13, they've allowed us to be absolutely sure of these 2 things. Number 1, the United States is going to stand with and protect Israel from the world government in the end time. And we've been doing it for years now, with our veto power, the UN Security Council veto power. Number 2, that the United States will not be part of the world government and therefore will not be under the reign of the Antichrist. Now, this is very important. And this is, like I say, I'm very thankful for this prophecy giving us some clarity. But get this, the Trump administration understands that open borders lead to more global governance. Trump understood the process of globalization during his candidacy. And while he was running for president, he would give in his speeches and he would talk about globalization and how bad that is for America. Well, Irvin, Baxter, myself, our research team, we started watching this and we were thinking, man, this guy, he may not know Bible prophecy, but he understands that there's a world, they're trying to establish a world government, and he doesn't want to be a part of it. And that is why, because Donald Trump understood about the process of globalization and that open borders led to more global governance, that's why we withdrew from the global compact on migration. So let me explain that. That would be very important here. Strobe Talbot, you remember, he was the president of the Brookings Institution from 2002 to 2017, and he was the former Deputy Secretary of State in the Clinton administration. He stated that, and he stated very clearly in an article that he wrote back in Time on Time magazine in 1992, it was called The Birth of the Global Nation. He said, in the next century, nationhood as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority or a world government. So that's the goal of every globalist, along with the United Nations, the removal of, and this is where we lead to what I'm talking about today, the open borders. This would lead to the removal of national borders and the creation of a single global community where the United Nations could dictate trade and they've got the World Trade Organization, and they would dictate migration. And they've got the Global Compact on Migration, and they would dictate what we would do about global warming, climate change, and they want to dictate every aspect of your life. Read the Sustainable Development Goals sometimes. They want to dictate wealth redistribution. That's where we're headed, and Donald Trump knew that. And they have advocated this single global community, and that answers to a world government. So, but they realized for this to happen, nations would need to throw open their borders because they want to globally manage the migration, and you can't do that when one nation says, we've got protected borders here. Israel's the same way. They've got protected borders. You don't just let anybody come in. And so, but in the United Nations is totally anti-Israel. That's one of the reasons. Because they can't dictate to them what to do. And that's exactly what the United Nations is pressing for. So consider the United Nations, this is what we just withdrew from, the Global Compact on Migration, or the GCM. According to the United Nations, their own website, the Global Compact is a significant opportunity to improve the governance on migration, to address the challenges. You thought, well, you might be sitting back there going, man, I thought all this migration just happened just out of nowhere. People just up and started migrating, millions and millions of people. This is all a grand scheme, everybody. It's by grand design. And we're feeling the effects of it on our southern border. It's much more than just some drugs and some illegal people coming across because they want the American dream. We're way past that. We've had, the previous administration has let millions and millions and millions of people in, to the point where they were letting people come across without even questioning them. So this global migration compact, they wanted to govern migration. They wanted to address challenges associated with today's migration, and they think they know best. And so to strengthen the contribution of migrants and migration, they were looking into the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you understand the Sustainable Development Goals, which is basically, I'll give you a vague, not a vague, but just a real quick definition. It's a blueprint for global governance for the world by 2030, the Agenda 2030. The United Nations put out a blueprint. The United Nations, the nations of the world signed on and said, yes, we will implement your goals in our country. President Obama signed us on to it in 2015. Well, there are 17 goals. Goal number 10 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is to reduce inequality within and among countries. Target number, under all the goals is several targets. There's like 169 targets. Target number 7 of goal number 10 is to facilitate orderly, safe, regular, and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned, get that, not of just coming out of nowhere, people will start migrating. The implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies, okay, by grand design. So essentially, the UN wants to even out the inequalities among countries through the movement of people around the world in an orderly fashion. So this is a necessary step to the implementation of global socialism. Remember, I said the United Nations was designed from its inception to be a socialistic one-world governing body. Now, Andrew Arthur serves as a resident fellow in law and policy for the Center for Immigration Studies. He describes the situation like this. He said, were the United States to continue in the global compact on migration and were the impact to push to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the United States would essentially have to implement an open borders policy. Now, I'm going to say that, and you remember everybody in the United States that's pushing for open borders. They're pushing against Donald Trump to build the wall, okay? Anybody who's pushing for open borders believes in a world government. According to the United Nations, that's what they're pushing for. So this lawyer said that for the United States, that for us to stay with the global compact on immigration, we would have to implement an open borders policy to even make a dent in the inequality among nations, or implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. So just like the Paris Climate Agreement, you remember we pulled out of that, the Global Compact on Migration, it is to be used to implement the global management system or the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's why the United States decided to end its participation in the United Nations process to develop a global compact on migration. And what happened, once the Trump administration recognized that it was all boiling down to more global governing restrictions on the United States, the Trump administration simply withdrew from the global compact on migration. This is very important for us. We don't want to be part of a world governing body. In other words, we don't want the United Nations dictating to us how we control our borders. You see what I'm saying? It's not that I don't want people to come into our country. Anybody can come in. If you come in legally, and want to fill out the papers and get vetted, come on in. But to be an MS-13 gang member and to steal a person's child and try to come into our country and say, don't separate me from my child, this is my son, now we got a problem. You see the difference? And that's why Donald Trump and them have been talking about MS-13 and these human traffickers and drug traffickers and all these mules and all this other stuff. Now that's the mess we don't want in our country. There's nothing wrong with trying to keep them out. But if somebody wants to come in legally, come on. But Donald Trump recognized this. He recognized it was going to be more global governance over the United States. So we pulled out. On December 3rd, last year, 2017, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson stated, he said, negotiations on the Global Compact of Migration will be based on the New York Declaration, a document adopted by the United Nations in 2016 that commits the strengthening of global governance. And it contains a number of policy goals that are inconsistent with the United States law and policy. And he said, while we continue to engage on a number of fronts at the United Nations, in this case, we simply can't, in good faith, support a process that could undermine the sovereign right of the United States to enforce our own immigration laws and secure our borders. The United States supports international cooperation on migration issues, but it is the primary responsibility of sovereign states, not a world government, but sovereign states, to help ensure that migration is safe, orderly, and legal. There's nothing wrong with that. And then, of course, one of my champions in government, the government itself is not my champions, but one lady I really like is our United States ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley. She said, our decisions on immigration policies must always be made by Americans and Americans alone. You see, all of the Trump administration, they realized, remember what I said, that this open borders, whosoever will come in, don't even vet them, illegals, whatever, come on in. He realized that was all about the process of globalization and more global governance. These policies were being handed down from the United Nations, and he said, not going to have that, so we're pulling out. So Nikki Haley said, we, the United States, will decide how best to control our borders. We're not going to be dictated to by the United Nations, and who will be allowed to enter our country. So what happened? We pulled out of the Global Compact on migration. And of course, you can realize that as a result, the international community howled at Donald Trump for that. But he stood firm, pulled out, and now we're dealing with the mess on the southern border.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
Now, do you kind of get the picture of the importance of the recent presidential election? Very, very important. One of the candidates was absolutely willing to throw open the borders because of the edicts handed down from the United Nations, because this person was a globalist. They were going to throw the borders open, and we would have moved straight off into world government in many ways. Open borders was all about the global governance of migration, whosoever will. I mean, imagine, I was teaching, talking to the students in our Jerusalem Prophecy College this morning in Jerusalem, and they said, why would Mexico let, what was there, like a group of 1,500 to 2,000 migrants that were coming across from South America into the United States of America? You say, oh, Dave, that just happened on a whim. Those people just decided to come to America. I wouldn't bet on that. That stuff just doesn't happen out of nowhere. But why, the person asked me, why would Mexico allow these people to come across? And I said, they believe in a one world government. They're all wrapped up in a one world government. They would allow people to come across and come into America. Think about this. I asked the person in Israel, in Jerusalem, I said, imagine Israel letting somebody from Lebanon, a group of 2,000 people, just decide to come through your country and go down into the Gaza Strip. I'm telling you right now, that would never happen in Israel. That's what Mexico did. They allowed a group of migrants from South America to come in up to the border in the United States. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here on our southern border. And so Donald Trump, when he talked about the process of globalization in his speeches before his election, he knew a lot more than what people tried to make him out to be. You know, oh, he's not a presidential, or he's not a Democrat, or he's not a politician. He doesn't really know what's going on. Blah blah blah. No, he knew a lot more than what people give him credit for. He talked about globalization when his opponent was trying to push us straight off into that. And so you understand now, after I've gone through some of what is transpired lately, the importance of the recent presidential election. During the recent presidential election, let's talk about the difference of immigration in the presidential election. Trump said, and in light of Bible prophecy, because remember, there was a prophecy of a world government, but not that the United States would be part of that, okay? So in the recent election, let's talk about immigration. Donald Trump said, I will build a great wall. Well, you remember all of the international community was screaming, and let's just say it, the Democrats were howling at him. I can't believe you would build a wall. The Pope even said something about him building a wall, even though the Pope has a giant wall all around the Vatican. I've been there two or three times. I've seen the wall. You're not going to get in that wall. But yet he said something about Trump building the wall. So Trump said, I will build a great wall. And he said, you cannot have illegal immigration. You don't have a country if you have that. This is Donald Trump, and he said, as it's been stated continuously in the press, people are pouring across our borders unabated. Public reports routinely state great amounts of crime are being committed by illegal immigrants. This has to be stopped, and it must be stopped now. This is before he became president. He said, I will build a great wall and on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for the wall. And he was responding to a question on mass deportation. He said, I wouldn't call it mass deportations. He said, we're going to deport illegals in a very humane fashion, which is, I might add, enforcing the laws on the books. And he said, believe me, I have a bigger heart than you do. This was Trump. He said, we're going to do it in a very humane fashion. He said, I want terrorists out of our country. I want people who have bad thoughts out. I would limit specific terrorist countries from being able to come in. And we know who those terrorist countries are. Well, on the opposite side, Hillary Clinton said, we will not build a wall, period. She said, we're not going to build a wall. Instead, we will build an economy where everyone who wants a good paying job can get one. Well, I'm all for that. If people want to come in legally and not just let whosoever will fling the doors open and come on in. No, I don't want that. I don't want the MS-13s and all those guys coming in. Keep those at home. And she said, and we'll build a path to citizenship for millions of immigrants who are already contributing to our economy. She said, I believe that when we have millions of hardworking immigrants contributing to our economy, it would be self-defeating and inhumane to kick them out. She said in 2003, I sponsored the Dreamer Act, and I sponsored, I think in every Congress after that, I've been consistent and committed to comprehensive immigration reform with a path to citizenship. And Mrs. Clinton made this statement concerning Syrian refugees. She said, we're facing the worst refugee crisis since the end of World War II, and I think the United States has to do more. She said, I would like to see us move from what is a good start with 10,000 incoming refugees to 65,000 and begin immediately to put into place the mechanisms for vetting the people that we would take in. She said, I would stop deportations of the undocumented or the illegal. During the campaign, they called them undocumented. They're illegal people living in our country. She said, I would stop the deportations of that. She said, I do not want to see them deported. I want to see them on a path to citizenship. And that's exactly what I will do. Rather than enforce the laws, she said, you can count on me to defend President Obama's executive actions on DACA and DAPA when I'm president. And she said that referring to Obama's 2012 DACA and 2014 DAPA executive amnesties, which gave work permits and access to federal benefits to millions of legal immigrants. So now you can kind of get a big picture of what's going on down on the borders, or any country that they're trying to force them to open their borders. There are countries in Europe that don't want to do that. Open your borders. And so I wanted you to get a big picture today from the eyes of Bible prophecy, from that lens on what's going on here. It's a lot bigger than the liberal news media is making it out to be. You're talking about world government in action, the process of globalization. If we don't protect our borders, if we throw our borders open, then we basically have lost our nation. So, here's a question. Open borders, a fundamental right or a threat to national security? President Ronald Reagan stated this. He said, but the simple truth is that we've lost control of our own borders, and no nation can do that and survive. Well, President Ronald Reagan spoke those words during a press conference on June 14, 1984. Even then, America was grappling with the issue of border control and individuals entering the United States illegally. Border Patrol statistics indicate that not only has the problem persisted, but it's also worsened. In 2016, illegal aliens were crossing the Mexican border at a record pace. And it's really uncertain the number of illegal aliens presently living in the United States, because they're reluctant to self-identify. However, the Pew Research Center estimated the illegal population in 2016 to be, this was 2 years ago now, 11.3 million, and it is much higher than that now. So there's no lack of opinions in the debate on open borders versus secured borders, immigration, amnesty, and a path to citizenship for those in the country illegally. The fact of the matter is, everybody, if you look at it, I mean, we have a prophecy college in downtown Jerusalem, and we've had problems getting people visas in there. And we are of all good intentions, okay? But they just don't allow anybody to even get a visa into their country, much less just say, I'm coming over here and moving in. That just doesn't happen. And so for people to want to do that in our country, you can't have a country. Well, there are people who would like to destroy this country and do away with the United States of America and have a world governing body. Remember what Strobe Talbot said. We need to do away with the nation state and everybody answer to a world governing body. That is prophesied. In Revelation chapter 13 is the main prophecy of it. But those in favor of open borders, they argue that immigration is the cornerstone of America, and that nations have an obligation to those seeking a better life or protection from persecution. And opponents argue that the first duty of any sovereign nation is the security of its citizens. And controlled borders and immigration are necessary means to that end. So, most of the debates up until recently have been peaceful, but it's kind of getting nuts at this point. But at times they turn violent and go into destructive rioting and different things, gnashing on people. There are people that have threatened Donald Trump's family, everybody. You see, and he's trying. I've looked at this thing. We've watched it. I've watched his from the campaign trail to his election through the first however many days he's been in office. I've watched him. We've all watched him. Everybody's scrutinized his every movement, but we've watched him very closely. Overall, the guy is trying to do the best for America. Let's just face it. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, what you are. You got to say, look, the guy's trying to do what's best for America. Let's face it. And at the end of the day, for people to want to push their agenda so bad that they want to threaten Donald Trump, I mean, come on, everybody. Let's get the big picture here and understand what's going on and what they're trying to do in America. America, regardless of what some people think, is a Christian-based nation. Our original forefathers based our laws on the laws of Scripture. We're a Christian nation, everybody. And that's the kind of nation that we want all the way until the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's why we will fight we'll fight all of these agendas that are being pushed in the United States, from the Supreme Court all the way down. We will resist things that do not line up to Scripture in our society. One of those major things is global governance. I'm not going to be ruled over by a world government. Of course, we know the United States is not going to come under the full reign of the Antichrist because of Revelation 12:14. It's not, and Revelation 13. We're not mentioned in that world governing body. And that's why you have to look at the importance of the previous election and why it was important that we elected somebody who would want to pull us out of this world governing body. We were studying it very hard. And we were looking at, one of them was going to go straight off into the process of globalization. One of them was going to pull us out of the world government. And he's done that time after time. The Paris Climate Agreement, this global compact on immigration, recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, pulling us out of the Iran deal, pulling us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and many other things. Pulling us out of this world governing body. The world government in the earth today is Satan's effort of ruling the world. He wants everybody to pledge allegiance to him so he can control them in the end. That's the goal here. And so that's when you look at the open border situation going on, now you know the big picture. It's not just Democrats and Republicans going back and forth. It's so much bigger than that. It's the world governing body seeking to open our borders and manage migration in a global governance scheme before 2030.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of End Time Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with End Time Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.